Hey everyone, Enrique here. Welcome to another review. If you would have told me that was going to be a Prime series where not only would it star Nicolas Cage, but also would he be playing a version of Spider-Man in the 30s and was going to be amazing, all in black and white, I wouldn't believe you, but now I do because man, it's so good to be a Spider fan because you get to see a lot of variations of the character, whole new kind of stories, and the best part about this is that it's taking place in a time that it was no heroes, like it had no MCU, no other heroes from that era, just Spider-Man, or in this case, Spider. So here's my review of the first two episodes of Spider-Noir. Now, before I get into anything, it should probably mention that this is not connected to the MCU. This is not connected to my Marvel trilogy, my Marvel Knight trilogy. Is going to be just taking a look of this series, all the first two episodes, the characters. I'm going to talk about the rest of the episodes in later videos, but for the meantime, it's important that we talk about the first two and the characters that inhabit it so we get an idea of what we're in for. So, with that out of the way, what made this series be into production and being released in Amazon Prime? Well, let's take a look at the history. So, this is based on the comic book version of Spider Noir that was a connection into the Spider Verse that happened in the comics. We got to see a version of Peter Parker taking place in the 30s, back when there was a depression in North America. A lot of gangsters were taking over, and we got to see a lot of danger and a whole new different variations of past characters, of characters we have seen before, but taking place on that era. So the Spider, or Spider Noir as people like to call it, it's very different from the ones that we got in modern times or even created in the 60s. This Spider Man was more grizzled, more hardcore. Hell, he even carried a gun in most of the runs. Now, of course, we are going to talk about the version, how he this spider handles himself. But needless to say, not many people know about this character. My exposure to Spider Noir was in the video game called Spider-Man's Shattered Dimensions. It was seeing how the character operates, narrating like a pulp detective from that era. We got to see action sequences and how he fights his enemies. Sometimes he sneak on behind because the dark aesthetic helps a lot. But we got that version of that in that video game. But then years later, when Spider-Man got an animated version with the movie Into the Spider-Verse, created by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, we got to see a version of Spider-Noir voiced by none other than Nicolas Cage. I mean, this was crazy. I mean, I love Spider-Man. I love all the variations, but see Nicolas Cage, a guy who played Ghost Rider and Superman, well, not in the movie in live action, but in the voice acting of the Teen Titans. Yeah, that happened. But to see him or to hear his voice come out of this character and somehow making it funny, it's a testament to the guy's talent. Now, it should also be mentioned that Spider-Man was owned by Sony, and for years they have tried to make the character into a lucrative franchise similar to the MCU. After all, they got the rights of the character, the stories, the the different villains, the different side characters. So they wanted a piece of a pie, but they have failed spectacularly over and over again. Not just with the Amazing Spider-Man 2, but with the spin-offs of the villain characters. Now, I have already reviewed the third installment of Venom alongside Morbius and Crave the Hunter. I haven't reviewed Madam Web, but I'm not mentally prepared for that movie. And no, I didn't enjoy it. Even if it is so bad it's good, I don't think this was a great example of the character. And one day, hopefully soon, I get to talk about it. But in the meantime, let's talk about what was happening during that time. During the time, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller pitched the idea to Sony and the studios to make either a movie or a TV show. Now, I don't know the circumstances of how it got created, but I know that when they pitched the idea, they greenlighted it and they casted Nicolas Cage in it. So it was going to be live action and it was going to show us an aesthetic that was taking place in the 30s. We saw some behind the scenes photos of the production. We got to see a version of Spider-Noir in live action during the behind the scenes, and it will look amazing. Now, at that time, it was uncertain about the future because with all the cancellations that Sony was making after the failures that I mentioned before, it was pretty much almost concluded that Spider Noir was going to be one of them. But somehow somebody had faith on the project and decided to greenlight it. But instead of being released in something like Disney Plus, they pitched it to Amazon Prime. After all, they are now famous for releasing a lot of shows based on comic book characters. We saw it with The Tick. We saw it with Invincible. We see it in The Boys, who just finished their season this year. And more importantly, they also created a version taking place in the 30s about Batman. It was called Cape Crusader, and it was an animated version of the Vigilante, and it was taking place on that era. It had the same idea of aesthetics, same changes, same productions, but it was very different. It got a season 2 at the time of this recording, so we have to wait and see. But needless to say, this was an opportunity to show how they can handle the character outside of the MCU watch. So that's what we got in this, and I'm so happy that we got the version of this character in live action. So now that I already give you the story of the behind the scenes issues and how it got into production, let's talk about the story itself. But in order for me to do so, I have to do so in that era.
The rain didn't wash the grit off the Big Apple in 34. It just made the blood slicker on the pavement. New York was drowning in a sea of cheap booze, crooked cops, and heavy lead, and the only guy keeping the sharks at bay was a masked phantom they called the Spider. But even heroes bleed. When the lovely Ruby took a one-way trip to the graveyard, Ben Riley hung up his webs and crawled back into the bottom of a bottle. For 5 long years, the city screamed, but the spider stayed dead. Then she walked into the joint. Her name was Kat Hardy, a looker with eyes that spelled trouble and a desperate line about a missing boy named Flint Marco. It was supposed to be a simple missing persons gig, but even in this town, nothing stays simple for long. The deeper Ben digs, the more the past starts crawling its way out of the gutter. The old enemy Silverman is pulling the strings from the shadows again, running this city's underbelly like a personal fifth dome. Rumors are swirling about men with unnatural, terrifying powers, who are familiar faces from a life Ben trying to forget. You can lock the past in the cellar, but eventually it's gonna break down the door. The clock is ticking, and the shadows are lengthening over in Manhattan. Ben can't fight this war alone. With Janet keeping the ledger straight and Robbie chasing the ink on the front page, the stage is set. To find Marco and bust Silvermane's syndicate wide open, Ben Riley has to dust off the fedora, load the irons, and crawl back into the dock. Like it or not, New York needs the spider one more time.
All right, so let's talk about the casting characters. I should probably mention that I'm only going to talk about the first 2 episodes of Spider Noir since I'm going to give them their own other looks in later videos. But I'm going to focus on the first two just to get into the nitty gritty of all things. And I don't want to make this video very long. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about the villains of this series, starting with the Enforcers. There are 3 individuals who have distinct powers. So, I'm going to focus on each one before I talk about the main bad guy of this series. starting with Flynn Marco, aka the Sandman, played by Jack Houston. Just like in the modern version of Sandman, he's just a regular guy who's doing a lot of stolen things and being more of a hustler and trying to get by in a world that is very cruel to him. And when he acquires the powers of the sand, he still tries to get rid of it or trying to live by with it. But it's making things worse, and in this series is no exception. Since Flynn Marco is an enforcer to Silvermane's operations, even though deep down he just wants a way out for him and for his girlfriend, which I'm gonna get into later in the video. But needless to say, the difference between this Sandman and the one that we know from the comics and in movies is that his powers are not necessarily making him very controllable of the sand. In fact, it's making things worse for him. It's making his condition worse and worse by the minute. So he doesn't know how to control it or how to stop it. All he knows is that he has to find a way out before it's too late. And I have to say, Jack Houston does bring a level of not only cockiness but also sympathy to the character, similar to what Thomas Hayden Church did for the character in the movies. But yeah, it's still the same idea, just in a different story. Similar to that, we have Lonnie Lincoln, aka Tombstone, played by Abraham Popola. Now, I should probably mention this is a different version of Tombstone. As a matter of fact, we're gonna get a more accurate version in Brand New Day, so stay tuned for that. And we also got a version of him into the Spider-Verse movies. And he was played by the same actor that is going to play him in Brand New Day, which again I'm going to talk about in later videos when I see the movie. But needless to say, this is still the same Lonnie Lincoln, aka Tombstone. This is the same guy who starts off as an enforcer. His look is actually different, and he and Sandman were both part of an experiment that was conducted by a doctor after they fought in the First World War. Those guys are having conditions that give them superpowers, but at the same time is making them more ill and more uncontrollable, almost like they're losing their minds or losing stability of their own bodies. Lonnie is no exception. He, just like Flint, is looking for a way out because he doesn't want to look like a freak or be a freak. He wants to be a normal person but doesn't know how. And when Silvermane is knocking on his door, he starts to become more of a regular henchman, even though deep down, that's not what he wants. And I have to say, Abraham Popola does bring a level of sympathy to this character. I should also mention that he has a connection, a friendship between him and Robbie Robertson, which I'm going to get into. But in the comics and in other forms of media, Robbie and Lonnie have a complicated history, to say the least. And it was a history in which they were friends and then they became rivals. Or at the very least, Lonnie just hated Robbie and wanted him to be just like him, a criminal. But that is something that maybe one day I'll talk about. In regardless of this version, there is more of a kind friendship. Robbie seems to help Lonnie with his condition and to get the truth out about his powers as well as the others. And he's trying to find out the truth. And Lonnie, well, despite his mental stability being deteriorating with the use of his powers, he still appreciates the kindness that Robbie and all the others are bringing to him. Makes him more three-dimensional, to say the least. But one character that is very one-dimensional and in a good way is Dick Lydon, aka Megawatt, played by Andrew Lewis Caldwell. Now, if you've seen this actor play characters in, say, Henry Danger or in the Matrix movies, you know that this guy looks like a funny guy, like he's actually a comedian. And this one is no exception, but boy, did he make this character detestable, because Megawatt is just a mega douche. No, actually, never mind that. He's a mega asshole. That's what he is. But that's all into the performance. And if you're wondering, isn't this the Electro guy? Or isn't this the character Electro? Well, in actuality, it's different. I heard that there was some contract dispute with Sony in which they couldn't use him in this show, or at the very least, they put a cabal into that since they wanted to use Electro in the movies. I don't know if that's true, but I know that this is an opportunity to give another different character the spotlight because Spider-Man has a very length rogues gallery, and Mega One is no exception. But I should mention that in the comics, Dirk is more of an Australian ex-convict who became an actor, then acquired superpowers, and then he became another villain of the week, in which Spider-Man had to stop in the 90s. Now, of course, Dirk in this version is very different from the one from Electro. You see, unlike Electro, in which he can sap his electricity through his arms and through his body, Dirk is a little bit different. He actually can kill his victims by punching them, by touching them. He's actually more of a close encounters guy. Like he's more fisticuffs, and his powers operate different from Electro. But needless to say, Dirk, just like Flint and Marco, also had superpowers by the Doctor. But unlike them, he doesn't see them as a curse, but a gift and an opportunity to take over. I'm gonna get into Dirk in later videos, but needless to say, he's an asshole, and arguably the final boss that Ben has to face in the end. But let's talk about the main villain itself. In this case, Finbar Byrne, or Finn if you want to call it, but we call him Silvermane, and it's played by Brendan Gleeson. Now, just like in the comics, Superman is a mafia criminal, or at the very least, a mafia boss. He actually is the one who has been staying in the game for so long and didn't want it to stop, to the point that he actually acquired a cybernetic body in order to preserve his life and to keep his racketeer of crime afloat. This series is no exception. There is one issue, and that is that he doesn't have anything that keeps him alive. But that doesn't matter because in this case, Silverman owns New York. He has made his entire life in crime, making people intimidated by him, be an intimidating force. Just like Kingpin in the movies and in the TV show, he's a force to be reckoned with. And it's very different to Kingpin. You see, Fisk has more of a soul, or at the very least, somewhat an understanding of preserving the city and trying to maintain order and control. But Superman only cares about himself by being in the game of being a mafia boss, by organizing crime and leading to it. He says himself that fighting is the point, which is more of a callback to what his original character was supposed to be. You know, staying the fight, never stopping because he doesn't know what else to do, and he doesn't want to let something like death get in the way of his plans and his schemes and his organizing crime. So he wants to stay in the game as much as he can, and is willing to go through anybody to get there. And that is no exception in this series. He's a force to be reckoned with. He's a guy who's also very funny but intimidating at the same time. And he's actually well played by Brendan Gleeson. He actually brings the character to a funny but also dramatic way. And it's very, very good to see that an actor like him gives a character just like this such a weight and such an intimidating nature that you don't want to cross with him. You don't want to be in his way because otherwise he might kill you in an instant. And that is a really good performances. In fact, it's almost like I would have wished they would have done with Falcone in Batman Begins, who was played by another British actor, Tom Wilkinson. May he rest in peace. But yeah, I really enjoyed the performance, and I really enjoyed seeing Silvermane in another form of media. He's a very underrated character and an underrated villain that I wish one day Spider-Man can come across with because they could create great stories with him. Now let's talk about another variant of a character, Cat Hardy, played by Lin Ju Lee. I should probably mention that this might be a coincidence, but this is the third time that I see this actress play a character from the 30s. I mean, Babylon, Sinners, she always plays a character that is taking place before modern times. It's almost ridiculous, but it's almost like she's really good and is actually really looking like someone from that era. Karen Hardy is a singer in a bar that Superman owns, but she is trying to find a way out to get rid of Silverman, kill him, and run away with Flynn Marco, who, as you know, is the boyfriend of Kat. So in this case, she's pretty much your femme fatale of this series, and is a variant of Felicia Hardy, aka Black Cat. The cat name is almost like, I don't know, too on the nose for me, but I still appreciate it. But one of the things that I enjoy about this series is Lee Jun Lee's performance as Cat Hardy. She's definitely the closest thing we got from an actual black cat. Because, as we all know, Black Cat is like the ultimate, or one of the different versions of a femme fatale, always straightening the line between good and evil. And in this case, while she's not necessarily evil, she does have her own selfish motives in order to leave Silvermane. She wants to have a normal life. She wants to be away from Silvermane's grasp, and she's looking for ways to do so, even if she has to hurt the people that she cares about. In this case, Flint and Ben Riley. And yeah, she's most definitely somebody that you don't want to mess with, because she can be beautiful and her voice is, she sings like an angel, but man, she can be a deadly force if you look away. I mean, or someone who is ready to drop you on your head. And she's not shake by the fact that if she betrays you, she's just gonna do whatever she can to survive, and that is the point for her. But I have to say, Legion Lee really brings the character to a whole new level, based on so many actresses who play femme fatales in noir movies before. Some of the inspiration she acquired was from Kate Basinger. I think I saw her in LA Confidential, and yeah, she was like a definition of a femme fatale, and it was a perfect inspiration for her. The lighting, the acting, the cinematography all help to highlight the fact that she is very dangerous, and yet you want to be with her no matter what. She can make you want her, and then she will betray you in a dime, just like that. And I appreciated that. So now let's talk about the heroes of this series. So I'm gonna start with the lesser ones that people don't know about. Starting with Janet Ruiz, played by Karen Martinez. Your typical secretary with an attitude, she's the personal secretary for Ben Riley's private investigations, and she's more of a better private detective than Ben is, because she's more subtle, she's more confident, feisty, sassy, and that's one of the things that Ben really relies on, because she can be very helpful and skillful whenever they're trying to find out about the story, about the investigation, and what is happening with the powers. She also serves like the moral compass that Ben really needs, because she has been sticking with him ever since they started the PI business, and that is something that Ben really relies on. But deep down, and some other times, Janet can be hurt by Ben's life, and she's not afraid to let Ben know of his misdeeds or his bad decisions. Regardless of that, Karen plays an excellent character, a funny one at that, and she is a very talented lady. I mean, I want to see her in more episodes of Spider-Noir. She can bring a lot of sassy comedic timing to the table, and I hope to see her in more movies and TV shows, because man, Karen Ruiz, it really is funny, and it really brings a lot of levity to a pretty much darker show, if that's even possible. Now let's talk about Robbie Robertson, played by Lamore Morris. If your only exposure to this man was from the show New Girl and you only saw him as a comedian actor, then maybe this one will bring something new to the table. You see, just like in the comics, Robbie Robertson is a guy who cares about Ben Riley, or at the very least, he cares about Spider Man as well. He actually sees him as a hero, where the Daily Bugle and specifically J. Jonah Jameson see him as more of a menace. But the best part about Robbie is that he's a guy who is also looking for the truth and he's willing to risk it all and put his trust into the superheroes in order to find out. And that is showing a lot. And I have to say, Lamore Morris brings a level of snappiness to the character as well. He's both funny but also very confident at the same time. And he works on every angle possible and he's ready to risk his life to save his friends. And I have to say, this is the version of Robbie Robertson that I wanted to see. A guy who's ready to put his life on the line if it means to find out the truth or to protect his friends. I really enjoy his performance here. And now let's talk about the main character of this show, and his name is Ben Riley, aka the Spider, played by Nicolas Cage. Okay, I'm probably exaggerating with that, but what can I say? This was perfect casting. So let's talk about the character. Ben Riley is a PI investigator who is also the Spider, a vigilante who protects New York. But of course, as I said, he loses Ruby and stops being the Spider for 5 years. And now that he sees a new case, a new investigation, seeing more people with power, and see his loved ones in danger or in peril, he has to put on the moniker of the Spider once again in order to find out the truth and stop Superman's crime. And that is something that I really enjoy about this series itself. Nicolas Cage as the Spider. We saw a version of him into the Spider-Verse, but now we saw him one in live action. He's not the first one to be Spider-Man in modern times, and it won't be the last. But let me just say that he brings a very comedic, very serious, but very wild thing to the table. He, just like in the movies, he actually acts batshit insane, but also acts like a confident guy from the noir detective stories. In fact, this is pretty much based on the things that we see on pulp novels, in pulp detective novels like The Spirit and The Shadow. He's very similar on that respect. He's both serious and very wild at the same time, and almost flips it at in a dime in a millisecond. And then it's all credit to Nicolas Cage. He's such a fanboy of all comic book stories as a whole. I mean, this guy wanted to be Superman, wanted to be Ghost Rider, and he got to play those characters. But in my opinion, this is the best one he has played thus far. Because it's not only a character he's familiar with, but it's also a character they could give more of a personality. You see, Ben in this version is like a very drunk, very selfish, and very funny PI detective. He is willing to do a lot of crazy things in order to find out about the case, about the criminals, and to put a stop to all crimes. And that's something that I really appreciate. And the acting of Nicolas Cage, oh my god, is both hilarious and insane at the same time. But that comes with the territory. And that is something that I really enjoy about Nick's acting, because he's willing to do a lot of crazy things to make us not only laugh but also care about Ben Riley. I should probably mention also that the name Ben Riley in the show is implied that it's actually being changed, that it's actually not called that. But it's important to know that it's actually almost true to the comics as well. You see, there was a clone of Spider-Man. Yes, Spider-Man had clones. It's crazy. But in the comics, the clone was called Ben Riley. And this is something that they adapted into the show. But it's not implied that Ben is a clone, of course. This is just a name that he changed during the World War One when he returned home, and he wanted to be somebody else. And it's almost implied that he might be Peter Parker, But I'm not willing to think that. I mean, he might be somebody else. But regardless of that, I have to say that Nick gives this version of Ben Riley, the Spider, something enjoyable to see. And it makes me wish for more seasons like this. I want to see Ben Riley dig into more cases, find people with more superpowers. And I have to say, this is the perfect cast character that Nicolas Cage has played in his filmography, and that's saying a lot. All right, so let's talk about the episode. So I'm not gonna get too much into too deep, but I'm going to talk about what happens during the first two episodes. Starting with episode one, Step into My Office. This is the episode that introduces us to Ben, to his world, to his abilities as the Spider, the loss of Ruby, and how he stopped being the Spider for 5 years. So we see him being the PI detective in New York, investigating cases. One in particular is that he investigates the case of a person called Addison who has superpowers. Addison has the powers of the flame, similar to Molten Man, but he gets killed, and that is the cataclysm or the event that starts the investigation for Ben. All the while, as he investigates other cases, like the one of a woman disappearing, which is in this case Cat Hardy, he starts to be drawn into her. In fact, he almost starts to like her, almost attracted to her beauty and her voice. And we also see Silvermane's operations as a criminal, how as a crime boss, has a grip on New York, and even the mayor. We see how he operates with Robbie Robertson and Janet on the investigations. He actually starts out the show by actually using the photos that he took from the mayor and Ken Hardy in order to blackmail her, because of course they need money. Him and Janet don't have a good business in the PI investigations, so they need to do something to stay afloat. And that is something that we really enjoy about Ben. He's a guy who's not phased by doing anything wrong if it means to get the story or to get somewhat of a victory. And he didn't have any. But leading to the investigation, it led him to find Flynn Marco and to have a fight with him, in which he finds out that he has superpowers as him. And as he disappears, Kat knocks into his door to ask for his help. So Ben now is in a whole new story, and now he has to find out how to find Flint and how to stop Silvermane. So I really appreciate the first episode. Really, is starting off with no rodeos and actually giving us a straight line as well. Now let's talk about episode 2, Tread Lightly. This is the episode where we see the return of Ben as the Spider. We see him as the investigation continues, that both Flint and other people were part of an army in World War One, in which he was part of, and that's where he acquired his powers. But that's something we're going to learn in later episodes. As we see him investigate, we see Silvermane's goons attacking him and his offices, putting him into a crossroads, what to do and how to stop Silvermane. And that is something that I really enjoy from this episode. Seeing Ben struggle by not being the Spider, but ultimately finding out that that is the only way for him to stop guys like him, like Silvermane, and probably Flynn Marco. And we see a lot of action, a lot of investigations. It's cool to see Nicolas Cage in the suit actually kicking ass and stopping bad guys. Although I should probably mention, this version of the Spider actually kills people. In fact, we should not be very. We should suspend our disbelief on that, because we all know Spider-Man doesn't kill. That's one of the things that I really love about the character. But if this is going to be a different version of him, then we have to see something different. And while I don't like my heroes to kill, we have to keep in mind Ben Riley is a war veteran. He has killed people. So The whole no kill rule is out the window. Plus, this is a guy who has not only have to live with a lot of laws and having to be in a darker world, but he has to be also very aggressive at times as well, especially with guys like Silvermane. Also, on that note, it's also good to see how Silvermane behaves himself, how he treats Cat Hardy like a doll, like one of those China dolls that he tries to make cute for himself and for others. It's unsettling, but that's part of the character. It's good to see Nicolas Cage investigating more about the cases, see his connection with his peers, and it's also important to know that it's good to see Robbie's investigations, how he operates as a journalist, and how he wants to find out the truth, even so that he's willing to put his life on the line to talk to Lonnie Lincoln. That is someone who's not afraid of getting his hands dirty, and that is what I appreciate. But it's also good to see that Ben's actions have consequences. As soon as he becomes the Spider, he stops Silvermane from going to a place in which he was busted by the police because someone in the operation, someone inside, is writing him out. So I really appreciate that there's more complicated things that Ben has to deal with, but it's good to see that he's back as being the hero that people see him as. Now let's talk about the soundtrack. I'm not gonna get deep into that, but let me just say that the soundtrack made by Chris Bowers and Michael Dean Parsons is really good, given the vibe of being taking place in the 40s and also be almost mysterious and noir like. Things that I appreciate from the soundtrack are the songs by, for example, Lin Julie singing Dream a Little Dream of Me, which was very hypnotizingly good, and I really appreciate the way they shot that scene. And I appreciate the actress's singing voice, because damn, she really can sing a lot. But of course, let's not forget about the intro, who is sung by an actress or a singer called Kirby, who makes this show's intro. In this case, her song is called Saving Grace. And let me tell you, I really, really got hypnotized by that song. I repeat it over and over again in my phone, and I listen to it almost all the time. It really shows the range of some people's singing voices. And I have to say, she does bring that noir style of singing to her performance. I really appreciated that. So thank you, Kirby, for that beautiful song. Now let's talk about the aspect ratio. I'm not gonna get into that, but if you have a choice to pick one of each, black and white or color, I would say stick to the black and white, because not only do you have a much better experience by watching in black and white, but it also brings a level of aesthetic and atmosphere that you not always get to see in other TV shows. And this is something that is similar to, say, Sin City or in The Shadow or in other movies that use a noir aspect. But in my opinion, I would suggest you stick to black and white, because it's a better way to get the experience of being in a show in the 30s. So yeah, if you watch it in color, you might not get that same experience, but you will appreciate the color aesthetics and symbolisms that they have put in this show, especially on the clothes. So I definitely appreciated that. But I'm gonna talk about the production design and effects later in other videos. For now, let's just say stick to the aspect ratio of black and white. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed this show. I enjoyed this version of Spider-Man, of Spider-Noir, and I hope to see more of this character in other media. They should not stop making this show. We need to have a season 2, please. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Spider-Noir. At the very least, the first 2 episodes. I'm going to talk about later episodes later. But for now, just stick to this series. You won't regret it. Next week is going to be back to Super Sentai. But until then, I've been Enrique, and I'll see you next time. Peace.